You may not understand what God is doing right now, but one day you'll realize He was never taking something away. He was preparing something better. God never promised a life without storms, but He did promise to stand beside you through every single one. When you feel like giving up, remember, God didn't bring you this far just to leave you here. Sometimes God breaks your heart to save your soul. The delay is not denial. It's God's way of saying, "Trust my timing." God's plan is always greater than your pain. You may not see it yet, but everything you're facing now is shaping you for what God has prepared for you next. When life feels heavy, remember that God's hands are stronger than your worries. God never forgets you. Even when you think He's silent, He's still writing your story. The same God who made the stars knows your name and loves you endlessly. Every time you choose to forgive, you look more like Christ. Faith is not about seeing. It's about believing that God is working even when you can't feel it. When God closes a door, it's not rejection, it's redirection towards something far greater. Sometimes God calms the storm, and sometimes He lets the storm rage while He calms your heart. When you don't know what to do next, just stay still. God is not confused, and He will lead you. God's silence does not mean His absence. He is still moving in ways you cannot yet see. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are refined by God's mercy. Every trial you face has a hidden purpose to strengthen your faith and reveal God's power. When you feel like everything is falling apart, it might just be God rearranging things for your good. Don't be afraid of the unknown. God is already there. God's love has no expiration date. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. The things you prayed for years ago are the same things God is still working on. Don't lose faith. Sometimes God hides you in the dark because He's growing something great inside you. Every time you fall, His grace is already waiting to lift you back up. God doesn't make mistakes. He makes miracles out of them. The peace you've been searching for is not found in people or places. It's found in the presence of God. When God says, "Wait," He's protecting something sacred, your purpose. Faith begins where your understanding ends. God's delays are not denials. They are divine preparations. What you lost was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to direct you back to God. The same hand that broke you will be the one to heal you completely. God's love doesn't change when your circumstances do. Sometimes your deepest pain becomes the loudest testimony of His grace. Don't rush the process. What God is building in you takes time. You are never too broken for God to rebuild. God often removes what you thought you needed to give you what you truly deserve. The greatest battles are given to those who trust God the most. When you can't trace His hand, trust His heart. God is not punishing you. He's preparing you. What feels like an ending is often the beginning of something God has blessed. Sometimes God lets you hit rock bottom so you realize He is the rock at the bottom. Your prayers are never wasted. Even the silent ones move mountains in heaven. God's timing may test your patience, but it will never fail your purpose. When you surrender your plan, you make room for God's masterpiece. Even when life changes, God's promises remain. What breaks your heart today, God will use to bless your tomorrow. God never forgets your tears. He waters your future with them. Don't fear what's ahead. The one who goes before you already knows the way. God removes people for a reason. Trust His protection even when it feels like loss. When you feel unseen, remember that God's eyes are always on you. The moment you stop chasing control, you'll find peace in God's hands. Your weakness is the very place where God's strength shines brightest. Sometimes the lesson isn't in what God gives, but in what He takes away. God's love will meet you where you are, but never leave you there. Every setback is a setup for a greater comeback in God's plan. You may have lost faith in yourself, but God never stopped believing in you. When you walk with God, no season of life is wasted. God often hides His greatest blessings behind your greatest tests. Faith isn't about getting what you want. It's about trusting God even when you don't. Every unanswered prayer is God's way of protecting your heart. You may not see it now, but every closed door was God's protection. God's grace isn't given to the strongest, but to the willing. Even in your silence, God listens. The wilderness you're walking through is not punishment, it's preparation for the promise. When everything around you changes, hold on to the one who never does. God's love reaches deeper than your failures and higher than your dreams. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It's choosing to trust God in the middle of uncertainty. Sometimes you have to lose what you wanted to find what you truly needed, and that's always found in God. God's timing often feels like a delay, but it's actually divine alignment. When your heart feels heavy and your soul feels tired, rest in this truth. God is still in control. You don't have to understand every chapter of your story to trust the author of it. God's strength begins where yours ends. When life hurts, don't run from God. Run to Him. Even when people change, God remains the same, yesterday, today, and forever. God doesn't forget those who wait on Him. Sometimes God hides your blessing behind patience. The peace that God gives is not the absence of problems, but the presence of His power in the middle of them. God sees your pain, even when you hide your tears. You don't have to have it all figured out. God already has. Your past does not disqualify you from God's love. It makes your redemption story beautiful. When you walk through pain, remember, God never promised you an easy path, but He promised to walk with you every step of the way. Sometimes the things you prayed for didn't happen because God has something better. God's love is not a reward for the righteous, it's a gift for the broken who dare to come home. Even when you fall apart,
God sees beauty in your brokenness. The moment you hand over your fear to God, He replaces it with peace. When the night feels endless, remember, God made the stars to remind you that even in darkness, His light still shines. You might not see the purpose in your pain today, but one day you'll realize it was God's preparation for your destiny. God's promises don't expire. If He said it, He will do it. You are never too lost for God to find, never too far for Him to reach, and never too broken for Him to heal.
God's grace meets you exactly where you are, but loves you too much to leave you there. Sometimes the hardest battles are given to you because God knows your faith can handle them. When you choose to forgive, you don't free others, you free yourself. Even when your life feels like a mess, God sees a masterpiece in the making. Your waiting season is not wasted. God is working behind the scenes. God doesn't change your situation to prove His power. Sometimes He changes you to reveal His purpose. Every breath you take is proof that God isn't finished with you yet. When you carry heavy burdens, remember, Jesus already carried the cross, so you wouldn't have to carry them alone. The same hands that shaped the universe are holding your heart right now, steady, safe, and full of love. Don't be afraid of new beginnings. God specializes in making all things new. You may not understand everything today, but one day you'll see every detour and every tear was part of God's perfect plan.